Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kamala Ramprasad da Silva, Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussion today that is going to examine the implications of romantic relationships in the workplace. Love on the job, as we have titled today's discussion, is nothing new. In fact, millions of romance books over the years have been sold on this theme, and people will continue to fall in love with colleagues. So, how do we handle this in today's modern world? It will certainly be an interesting discussion for today. We are live streaming part of today's session on our YouTube channel, which is also being shared on LinkedIn. So hello to everyone who is also joining us online. And a very special thanks to our social media support, Warren Anderson, who's been doing a great job for us. At this point, let me also welcome everyone in the room for today's session. To those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to share that the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute is a nonprofit membership organization, and we welcome everyone who wishes to join in our purpose of improving corporate governance practices in the region. We are pleased to share that our membership reflects persons from not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but Jamaica, Barbados, Belize, St. Lucia, Guyana, the British Virgin Islands, St. Martin, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We host a wide range of workshops and panel discussions on evolving issues in governance, as well as our signature event, Governance Week, and a two-day global conference, which is held at the end of the year. All of these are held online to easily facilitate persons throughout the Caribbean region. We host one major end-of-year event, which is a fun networking activity, and that is held face-to-face. This event will be held in Guyana this year. And in fact, we have extended it to a week of activities in Guyana. We begin with two workshops. The first is on insurance and risk and will be held on Tuesday, November 19th. The second workshop runs for 2 days, Wednesday, November 20th and Thursday, 21st, on governance and compliance. Both workshops will be facilitated by Claire Gomez Miller, and the second workshop will include a simulation from Harvard Business Publishing, which I will help facilitate. On Friday, we host a panel discussion on effective board papers, geared specifically to our corporate secretaries network. But everyone who is involved in boardroom activities and decision making are welcome to join us. After which, we will enjoy some very unique Guyana games around a bonfire. The week culminates with our governance dinner and end-of-year networking event on Saturday, November 23rd, when the opening keynote will be our beloved Professor Bob Garrett, CCGI's Global Ambassador. All of these events will be held at Splashman's Resort, which is a beautiful and unique facility built around a man-made lake in Georgetown. Registration is already open. We are offering a special package for room and meals for the weekend, and we are giving first preference to our members and participants of our previous end-of-year event. I have to share that space at Splashman's is extremely limited, so we encourage persons who are interested to please contact us early as accommodation is quickly being filled up. With respect to our online training, very importantly, we have Janita John from South Africa, who will be conducting a 3-day workshop on identifying fraud, red flags in financial statements in early September. You don't want to miss this session. So please make sure that your directors and senior officers who are not already versed in finance, have them register for this workshop, because the financial statements are key to understanding strengths and some of the material weaknesses in your organization. Now, next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, that's August 20th and 21st, we have a 2-day workshop as we examine board conduct and discuss emotional intelligence and board behavior with A. Cecile Watson from Jamaica. And on August 22nd, we have a one-day workshop with Dr. Victoria Maloney Brown, where she would look at executive leadership and championing DEI in the boardroom. Ian John, CEO of CyberEye, will be conducting a workshop on cybersecurity on September 12th, where he will focus on artificial intelligence and deepfakes. And we would also have an online simulation for you to respond to a cyber attack. And finally, we have a workshop that is specifically geared for corporate secretaries on their role and function. We also run a workshop on writing minutes and other corporate documents with Faye Lopez Colimo. So I invite you to visit our website for details on these and other events, which are already opened for registration. So if you are not yet a member, do consider joining us and actively contribute to the conversation on how we can improve leadership and governance to achieve sustainable outcomes. Persons may join us as individual members, or your companies may choose to pay for bundle membership, which can cover from 6 to 12 members. As a member, you get discounted rates to attend many of these events that we have planned for this year. And of course, the opportunity to share your thoughts and even come on as a panelist and speaker. Now, just before we move to today's discussion, I wanted to also share our regular housekeeping announcements. Please feel free to put on your video so you can engage fully in the session. Also, please ensure that your name is correctly captured on your screen. We are in a virtual room together, not a webinar. So this allows each of us to engage freely with other participants. So we would like to ensure that everyone is easily identifiable. We would also ask you to keep your microphones on mute throughout the session. During today's panel discussion, if at any time you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your screen. When you are invited to speak, please do so very succinctly, and we ask that you please mute your microphone again to ensure that you minimize any disruptive noises in your background. And of course, you may make comments or ask questions in the chat feature at any time during the session. Those of you who need CPDs or PDUs as part of your ongoing certification, you may use these sessions to claim your points. However, to do so, you need to email us requesting the certificate, as we do not provide these automatically for our public sessions. So if you need this, we would first verify your attendance after you send us an email, and we will issue the certificate with the CPD points. And of course, as in all of our sessions, we would put a survey link at the end of today's session. And we would appreciate it if you take 2 minutes, please, to give us your feedback. This is important for us to plan. And I assure you that the information collected does go a long way in guiding us with respect to our planning and execution of our sessions. So as we turn our focus on today's session, I want to share that the discussion, the thought for today's discussion was propelled actually by 2 incidents which we saw occur in the global landscape. The first one is with respect to the CEO of BP, Bernard Looney, who resigned after it was found that he had several romantic relationships, apparently, that had not been disclosed. So I'm going to share a 2-minute clip on this in a short bit. But I find it is particularly sad what has happened, given that, you know, he spent his entire career at BP and is leaving as CEO in such under such a scandal. And then across in Canada, in April of this year, the chief financial officer of RBC, Nadine Ann, was fired as well for undisclosed romantic relationships. And she too had worked at the bank for a significant period of time, 25 years in fact, and currently is engaged in a legal battle with the bank over wrongful dismissal. So I'm going to share those 2 clips just very briefly to help set the context further for today. So let me just pull it up very quickly and we go to the first one. And just tell me if you were hearing the audio before I go to the widescreen, please.
Shares of energy giant BP closing the day down about 1.4%. News that the chief executive, Bernard Looney, has resigned after less than 4 years on the job. He took over as CEO of BP in 2020 after previously leading the company's upstream group. He had been with BP his entire career, in fact. And BP coming out in a statement here and saying that his resignation after his resignation, Murray Auchincloss, the company's CFO, will be CEO on an interim basis. It looks like that this has to do with conduct, according to the company, in their words, conduct in respect of personal relationships with company colleagues. Apparently, Looney had disclosed some relationships in the past before he became CEO, but the company found his disclosure to be lacking. So it seems as though this is what led to the stepping down. But this is really notable. Both of us were talking about this with surprise because he has really tried to push BP into the future in a way that has been different from many of the other oil majors.
Yeah, a lot of questions that are going to be raised here. You know, you put the personal conduct aside, which according to BP is the reason he's resigning. But in terms of the direction of the company, BP has been a company in transition, one of the most aggressive in terms of their transition to green, cleaner energy when you compare it against some of the other oil giants. I was just looking through some of the numbers again, because, you know, it's worth noting some of the aggressive targets they set out, reducing fossil fuel production by 25% from 2019 levels by 2030. Bernard Looney did cut back on that because, you know, he talked about not being able to bring in the revenue under more aggressive targets that talked about fossil fuel production cut of 40%. But really, BP, as much of an example as it can be in this space, has been. So there's going to be a lot of questions among investors about whether, you know, what that new leadership looks like and whether that direction continues under new leadership.
Okay, so 18 months ago, you laid out your vision for BP. A year ago, you gave more specific
you need to pause the video.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much. So now I will go to the second one. And this one is a longer video, but I'm just going to share a shorter piece of it. And let me just go to that.
As if there hasn't been enough bad news lately for the big banks here in Canada, news broke this past weekend that the Royal Bank has fired its chief financial officer, Nadine Ahn, after an internal review concluded that she was in what they're calling an undisclosed close personal relationship with another employee that violated the bank's code of conduct. Business will carry on, though, and Catherine Gibson, who is a long-term Royal Bank employee, she was named interim CFO, and a search will be held for a permanent replacement. The bank said that it was recently made aware of allegations involving Ms. Ahn and immediately launched an internal review, and they engaged outside legal counsel to investigate. In a statement, the bank said the investigation found evidence that in contravention to the RBC Code of Conduct, Ms. Ahn was in an undisclosed close personal relationship with another employee, which led to preferential treatment of the employee, including promotion and compensation increases. Now, both Ahn and the other employee who wasn't identified in the bank statement, they were fired. And importantly, according to the statement that RBC put out, they say the investigation found no evidence of conduct by the former CFO or the other employee with respect to the bank's previously issued financial statements, RBC strategy, or its financial or business performance. Now, Ahn joined Royal Bank back in 1999. She worked in a series of roles before being named CFO in September of 2021. Now, this is notable because at the time, she was the only female CFO at any of the big six Canadian banks. She earned $4.1 million in direct compensation in fiscal 2023. That includes a $650,000 salary, plus more than $3.4 million in bonuses and stock awards. That was an increase of about 25% from the previous year. Now, Royal Bank's annual proxy circular, it states that if any one of its top executives is terminated for cause, the bank will not pay severance, and the employee could also forfeit various other bonus awards.
Right. So that one, as well as you could see, is so interesting what can happen. And, you know, Sad in many respects because especially in the case of RBC as well, um, first female CFO for a major bank in Canada, there was no concern about her competence and ability on the job itself. So it's very noteworthy that we understand that these personal relationships can have such very significant impacts. And so today I'm so pleased for us to have this conversation. And I think that we have just some of the absolute right people here to have this discussion, especially because in our small societies, it's for one, it is unavoidable. People falling in love, but then how exactly do we respond to the situation when it occurs, especially if it is involving very senior persons, as we saw in these two instances. So we are very pleased to have an excellent moderator for today, someone who is very experienced in HR. In fact, Cavelle Joseph St-Omer is the president of the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So all of the bios for all of our panelists today have been given in the agenda sent to you this morning. And in fact, I want to ask Amelia if you can put that agenda in the chat again for persons who may not have received it in their emails. And I will now introduce Cavelle briefly, after which she too will introduce her panelists, and then we will open the floor for discussion. Okay. So our moderator, Cavelle, is a strategic human resource professional with more than 15 years comprehensive experience working in private and public sectors. She has a BSc in economics and law from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill. She's graduated with distinction with her MBA, specializing in human resource from the Atalogjack Global School of Business, and she's currently pursuing the Doctor of Business Administration with a specialization in leadership at Walden University. So once again, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. And Cavelle, I am happy to hand over to you now to moderate today's panel discussion on love on the job.
Love on the job. I love that topic. Is it February 14th yet, folks? But before we dive into it, I do want to introduce the participants or our attendees this afternoon to our wonderful panel. So let me at least start with that. Our first panelist, Mr. Ermath Harrington. He's an international business and capacity building consultant, founder and managing director of Harcon Group, based out here in Trinidad and Tobago. It comprises Harcon Harrington Consulting Limited, Harcon Business and Investigation Services Limited in Jamaica, and Artifacts Limited. These companies operate in multiple sectors and transcends various international and local business environments. Mr. Harrington's experience covers all aspects of organizational development, public and private, as well as civil society sectors, my apologies. And he serves at a national, regional, and international level when it comes to strategic planning and analysis, organizational capacity building, performance management, balanced scorecard design, and implementation and re-engineering of businesses. Most recently, you would see a lot of his publications in the newspapers centered around governance, sustainability, and ESG, as he focuses business on some of the emerging issues that businesses continue to face today. And he's also a leading change management and research specialist. Mr. Harrington serves on many boards, and in particular, recently was appointed as chairman of the EMA. Additionally, serves on the board of trustees of the Guardian Neediest Cases Fund. He's a member of the Council of the University of the West Indies and chair of the Chancellor's Governance Recommendations and Implementation Committee of the University of the West Indies. So welcome, Mr. Harrington. Our next panelist, Carmel Haynes, she's coming out of Barbados. Now, I did attend Cavelle campus, Carmel, so I spent some time in Barbados. Carmel is an executive director of the Barbados International Business Association, trading as BIBA, the Association for Global Business. BIBA represents approximately 140 member firms conducting business from and through Barbados in the areas of international finance services, trade and logistics, management and corporate services, international insurance, among others. As an executive at BIBA, Carmel sits on the board of the Barbados Private Sector Association, and by extension sits on the full social partnership, a tripartite participatory governance body made up of representatives of the labor, private sector, and government, chaired by the Prime Minister of Barbados. She's also currently a member of the transition team overseeing the creation of Business Barbados, a new statutory corporation designed to revolutionize business in Barbados. So let's welcome Carmel to the panel. Finally, hailing from Jamaica, is Dominic Summers. Dominic Summers is a software developer, product designer, and teacher. He works with individuals and organizations to align themselves with the future-proof skill sets necessary for growth and development in today's digital world. He serves and continues to foster his passion for the transformative power of technology through tech-based consultancy, advising companies such as Corpcare, Social Impact Consultants Limited on how best to employ software into their day-to-day operations. Dominic is very committed to the growth and development of Jamaica and Caribbean tech ecosystem. He's also an ever-willing speaker, delivering on topics related to digital transformation and how skills-based training can help to bridge the gap we both see in society and business. He loves playing tennis, gardening, music, and being with his friends and family. So I welcome Dominic all the way from Jamaica to the panel. And there we have it, folks, your panelists for today's session. So love on the job, again, a very much heated topic of conversation. We recognize that love is always in the air, whether it's on the work clock or whether it's at home. But love is always on the minds of people. And I think it is important for us to have this discussion. Recently, Forbes conducted a survey, and it was discovered that, and this is as recent as April 2024, so let me put the research timelines into context. It was found that the average full-time employee spends, of course, more than a third of their waking hours at work, and it leaves very little opportunity for people to meet anywhere else but on work in some instances. Prior to us opening up the panel discussion this afternoon, Kamla shared a bit about what happens even in the medical fraternity, right? Where the amount of hours people spend together. In fact, 61% of the Forbes respondents cited a lack of time outside of work as one of the main reasons why they eventually ended up with office romances and why it's perhaps so prevalent today. And 81% of workers had dated a co-worker at some point in their careers. So we could have how many policies, and we've seen within recent times a decline in no fraternizing policies. There was a time there was policies that said no type of fraternization at all. We've seen a decline in that. And we've also seen some taboo around the concept of a workplace romance. So there's a bit of taboo that goes along with it as well. But despite all of that, and the fact that some people know that it's perhaps a bad idea to date a co-worker, we still see it happening. So to open the lines of communication for this discussion this afternoon, I would like to start with you, Ermath. I would like to kick off our first question by asking generally, what is your opinion about office romance?
Thank you very much, Cavelle. Good afternoon, all. So from an opinion-based perspective, I mean, the fact of the matter, as you've alluded to, is here. And in my opinion, the fact that it's here and there's a need for initiating that thought process in terms of how a policy or procedural response can be adapted to that has to take into consideration several factors. It is not going to be a cookie cutter across the board sort of solution. Indeed, you spoke to some of the high level statistics from Forbes, even in terms of on the disclosure sides with respect to that survey. 57% of the persons surveyed reported workplace relationships would have impacted their work performance. 35% didn't report their relationship to the employer. And 50% report flirting with their coworkers, which is usually the first stage before you go into the love gear. So for me, the approach, in my opinion, to addressing this has to be an intersection that takes into account the policy focal areas, the reasons why the phenomena occurs, because it's here. It's been occurring since time immemorial. The organizational typologies, which bring with that their own cultures and subcultures and nuances, the extent of policy versus the law, because then we start to go down into the realm of rights and employee rights and human rights, etc. And to what extent in that intersection, the policy mitigation issues are documented to address the specific scenarios in each of the organizational typologies. So for me, it's not a easy fix per se. It's going to be, as it unfolds, it's going to be a very adventurous journey, and I can see a lot of side conversations, leading conversations coming out of this as the issue continues to gain traction in the corporate space.
Okay, you've given us a lot to think about there, Ermath, and I'm coming back to you on two things. But I want to move over now to Carmel, right? Carmel, what is your general opinion about office romance, workplace romances?
Thanks, Cavelle. Sorry, I was having a little difficulty unmuting. So I think, as we have all rightly expressed, it's a reality of the situation. It's been said that you can't help who you love. And then obviously, if you are in a position where you are seeing, a certain person every day, there is a relationship building, you get to know the person, etc. And I think that, especially given, our cultural context in the Caribbean, we don't do very well with boundaries, I think. We've seen, that legislation has had to step in over the past, say, 20 years, and we've seen more sexual harassment legislation across our Caribbean nations where not just sexual, all sorts of other uneven dynamics where governments are trying to mitigate against exploitation. But for something like this, which is obviously a little bit more nuanced, you've seen different companies adopting different policies to deal with it. And so I think the important thing is, and especially as we have heard, I think both illustrations that Kamala set out, what we were dealing with that apparently was the most egregious was the lack of disclosure. And I think that was the downfall of both of the executives. And of course, it's very difficult to keep secrets in the Caribbean. So the idea that, your personal relationship is your private relationship, if it's within a workplace context, it really cannot be. It has an impact, especially depending on what is the, the level at which each of the partners sits in the company, what is the information that they are privy to, etc. All of those have an impact. And so therefore, I see nothing against it, but we must understand that as we evolve and as we become more internationalized, that really and truly, we have to look at how we conduct our personal relationships, whether friendships, romantic relationships, etc., in the context of how our workplaces are governed and what are the, as I mentioned before, the culture, the ethics, the values, etc., of those workplaces.